Only space, last space, weak space, did space, we space, developed space, penicillin space, and space, television space, and space, nuclear space, power. Space and space, now space is space, America space, new space, spacecraft space, succeed space, and space, reaching space, Venus. Space, we space, will space, have space, literally space, reach space, the space, star space, before space, midnight space, tonight space. Surely, space, the space, opening space, vista space, on space, space, promise space, high space, cost space, and space, hardships. Space as space, well, space as space, high space, reward. Space. This country space was space, conquered space by space, those space, whose space, move space, forward space, and space, soul space, will space, space, space. The space exploration space of space, 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 will space, go space, ahead. Space, weather space, we space, join space, in space, it space, or space, not. Space and space, it space, is space, one space of space, the space, great space, adventure space, two space, be space, the space, leader space of space, other space, nation space, can space, except space, to stay space, behind space, in space, race space, for space, space, space. Those space, who space, came space, before space, are space, made space, certain space, that space, this space, country space, road space, this space, first space, waste space of space, the space, industrial space, revolution. Space, the space, first space, waste space, of space, modern space, inventions. Space and space, this space, first space, waste space, of space, nuclear space, power. Space and space, this space, generation space, thus space, not space, intent space, two space, founder space, in this space, backwash space, of space, the space, coming space, age, space of space, space. Space, weave space, mean space, two space, be space, earth space, part space of space, it space, mean space, two space, lead space, it. Space for space, this space, I space, of space, the space, world space, now space, look space, into space, space. Space to space, the space, moon space, and space, to space, the space, planet space, beyond. Space and space, we space, have space, vow space, that space, we space, shall space, not space, see space, it space, govern space, by space, a space, hostile space, flag, of space, conquest. Space but space, by space, a space, banner space, of space, freedom space, and space, peace. Space, we space, have space, vow space, that space, we space, shall space, not space, see space, 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 field space, with space, weapon space, of space, mass space, destruction. Space but space, with space, instrument space, of space, knowledge space, and space, understanding. Space. In space short, space of space, leadership space, in space, science space, and space, in space, industry. Space of space, hope space, for space, peace space, and space, security. Space, our space, obligation space, to space, our self space, as space, well space, as space, others. Space, all space, obligation space, to space, our self space, as space, well space, as space, others. Space, all space, required space, as space, to space, make space, this space, effort. Space, to space, self space, this space, mysteries. Space, to space, self space, them space, for space, their space, good space, of space, all space, men. Space and space, to space, become space, the space, worlds, space, leading space, space, faring space, nation, space. For space, 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 science. Space like space, nuclear space, science, space, and space, all space, technology. Space has space, no space, conscience, space, of space, its space, own, space. I space, do space, not space, say space, that the space, we space, should space, or space, will space, go space, unprotected space, against space, the space, hostile space, misuse space, of space, 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 any space, more space than space, we space, go space, unprotected space, against space, the space, hostile space, use space, of space, land space, or space, sea. Space but space, I space do space, say space, that space can space be space, explored space, and space mastered space, without space feeding space, the space fire space of space war. Space without space, repeating this space, the space, mistake space, the space, main space, the space, made space, in space, extending space, is space, rig space, around space, this space, globe space of space hours. The space is space, no space strife. Space, no space prejudice. Space, no space national space, conflict space, in space, outer space, as space yet. Space. Its space is space for space, this space, reasons. Space, that space, I space, regard space, the space, decision space, last space, year space, to space, shift space, our space, effort space, in space, from space, low space, to space, high space, gear space, ice, space, among space, the space, most space, important space, decisions. Space, that space, will space, be space, made space, during space, my space, incumbency, space, in space, the space, office space, of the space, presidency. The space mariner space, spacecraft space, now space, on space, it's space, wave space, to space, Venus space is space, the space, most space, intricate space, instrument space, in space, the space, history space, of space, science space, and space, finally, space, the space, effort space itself, space, one space, still space, in space, it's space, infancy. Space has space, already space, create space, earth space, great space, number space, of space, new space, companies. Space and space, 10 space, of space, thousand space, of space, new space, jobs. Space, and space, related space, industry space, and space, generating space, new space, demands space, in space, investment space, and space, skill space, personal. Space and space, this space, city space, and space, this space, state. Space and space, this space, region. Space, full space, share space, greatly space, in space, this space, growth. Space, what? Space, war space, one space, the space, further space, outpost space, on space, the space, all space, frontier space, of space, the space, west space, will space, be space, the space, further space, outpost space, on space, the space, new space, frontier space, of space, science space, and space. Space Houston. Space, your space, city space of space Houston. Space with space, its space, man space, spacecraft space center. Space, real space, becomes space, the space, hard space of space, a space, large space, scientific space, and space, engineering space, community. Space, during space, the space, next space, 5 space, year space, the space, national space, aeronautics. Space, or and space, administration space, X space, 2 space, double space, the space, number space, of space, scientist space, and space, engineer space, in space, this space, area. Space, 2 space, increase space, its space, outlay space, 4 space, salary space, and space, expenses space, 2 space, 60 space, million space, a space, year. Space, 2 space, invest space, some space, 200 space, million space, in space, plant space, and space, laboratory space, facilities. Space and space, 2 space, direct space, or space, contrary space, 4 space, new space, effort space, over space, 1 space, billion space, from space, this space, center space, in space, this space, city space. This space, here space, budget space, is space, 3 space, times space, what space, it space, was space, in space, January space, 1961 space, and space, it space, is space, greater space than space, the space, budget, of space, the space, previous space, 8 space, years, space, combined space. Space, expenditure, space, will space, soon, space, rise, space, some, space, more. Space, from space, for space, sense, space, per space, person, space, per space, week space, 2 space, more space, than space, 50 space, sense space, earth space, week space, 4 space, every space, man. Space, women space, and space, child space, in space, the space, united space, state. Space, for space, we space, have space, given space, this space, program space, a space, high space, national space, priority space, even space, those space, I space, realize space, that space, this space is space in space. Some space is space measure and space act, space of space faith, space and space vision. Space for space, we space, do space, not space. Now space, no space, what space, benefits space, await space, us. Space. Well, space is space then. Space and space, we are space, going space to space, climb space. Space and space, the space, moon space, and space, the space, planet space, and our space then. Space and space, new space, hope space, for space, knowledge space, and space, peace, space, our space then. Space. Thanks.